4 minutes out, so we can get started. So we don't have to wait.
Richard, we don't have quorum yet. So once we
We
have
don't have quorum yet? Oh, look at that. Okay.
make this gallery instead of speaker.
Sorry, everybody. Did not realize how many folks we have on joining us virtually. So that's great. And let's see, are we at quorum? We are at quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. And Co-Chair Cruz, whenever you get here, you can jump right on in.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee meeting. For those around the table, please turn your microphone on when you're speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name for the purpose of the record when you're making a comment or asking a question, and mute when you're not speaking. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you are in the audience today, please remember to sign in at the information table. If you parked in the garage, make sure you validate your parking unless you just want to, you just want to contribute to capitalism. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assist devices are available via MAG staff. We will now ask Kelly to proceed with a roll call. Please indicate you are here in your organization after Haley calls your name.
Thank you, Co-Chair Cruz. Michelle Alberti. Dawn Bogart.
Dawn Bogart, Homeless Youth Connection. I'm here. Good morning.
Vanessa Carthel.
Present, Vanessa Carthel, ABC Housing.
Ashley Ziganek for Allison Cook Davis.
I'm here with the Morrison Institute.
Callie Lamers for Aaron Cowan Haig. Stephanie Crum.
Hello, good morning. Stephanie Crum with Solari.
Nicole Gibson.
Nicole Gibson with you, Mom.
Anne Marie Johnston.
Good morning, Anne Marie Johnston with Community Bridges.
Christina Lopez. Marcy McFarland.
Marcy McFarland, Home Inc.
Jim McPherson.
Jim McPherson, Phoenix Community Alliance.
Reina Padilla Guzman.
Reina Padilla Guzman with Chicanos por la Causa present.
Jennifer Page.
Good morning, Jennifer Page, Mercy Care.
Aaron Rain.
Aaron Rain, present, City of Mesa.
Patricia Scott Lopez. Sarah Sims. Laura Scott Nicky. Michelle Stokes. Christopher Wallace. Emily Walsh.
Emily Walsh, present with Maricopa County.
Co-chair Nathan Smith.
Nathan Smith,
and co-chair Richard Cruz.
Richard Cruz, Human Services Campus, present.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Great. Thank you so much. Back to you, Chair.
The next item on the agenda is the call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the Continuum of Care committee that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience. Agenda item, unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. MAG staff, were there any comments received or anyone who has joined the call to offer comments?
There were no public comments received or members of the audience wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. So we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda will approve multiple items at the same time. Committee members can always ask for an agenda item to be pulled off the consent agenda to be heard during the meeting, at which time staff can provide additional information, give a presentation, and answer any questions. Does any member of the committee have questions or comments on the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. Just one moment, because I'm turning into the garage. Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Was that Jim?
Yes.
Okay, and so we have a motion from Jim to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Marcy McFarland seconds.
Okay, it's probably moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. For committee members in the room, we will do a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
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 Those opposed, okay. For members joining remotely, Haley will proceed with a roll call vote.
Thank you. Before we get into the roll call vote, whoever is iPhone on our screen, can you just identify yourself? Is there any chance that is Callie? Okay. Don Bogart.
Aye.
Sorry, yes, it's Callie. I'm trying to get in.
No problem. Thank you. Don.
Aye.
Ashley Ziganuck for Allison Cook Davis.
Yay.
Callie Lamers for Aaron Cowan-Haig. Stephanie Crum.
Hi.
Anne Marie Johnson.
Yay.
Reina Padilla Guzman.
Yay.
Jen Page.
Yay.
Aaron Rain.
Aaron Rain, yay.
Emily Walsh.
Yay.
Did I miss anyone? Great. Back to you, Chase. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Christina Lopez here for Native American Connections.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next agenda item. We're going to go to the quarterly trends report. The Homeless Management Information System team developed a dashboard that explores the inflow, active, and outflow within the homeless system. The HMIS team, in coordination with MAG staff, produced a quarterly homelessness trends report using the information from the system flow dashboard to be shared more broadly for review and approval. Cleo Warner, Human Services Planner with MAG, will provide an overview of the report.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So here is our quarter one report for 2023. So if this is one of the first times you are looking at this, then have you know that all of the data on here is coming from our Homelessness Management Information System, or HMIS, unless otherwise noted on the report. So on this first page, we see a count of our actively homeless households, and we are seeing this spike happening towards the end of our quarter. And the numbers here are representative of households. And if you read the narrative, which is available online to you and also in your agenda packets, you'll be able to get individual counts. And scrolling down, we have our new to system numbers and sort of reflective of our overall active increase. We're also seeing a very large increase compared to last quarter in those who are new to system. So these are households experiencing homelessness for the first time. And the last graph on the page, positive exits, you can see overall down since last quarter, but we have that sort of increase happening at the very end towards March. And to the next page. This is where we get a snapshot of the demographic makeup of who is in our system. So these numbers really don't fluctuate much quarter to quarter as we have seen. But what I find very interesting on this page is if you scroll down a little bit, you can get comparisons to census data, which gives you a sense of some disparities that we see in our system versus general population. And to the next page, we have our subpopulations. And as we can see, we are for families still down from overall spikes, but are seeing that increase in March there. But we are, as mentioned, still on that 21% decrease since the peak in March of 2022. With older adults, we're seeing this number continue to climb every quarter. This quarter is no different. And so we had a 5% increase since last quarter, which was already a pretty significant increase from the quarter before that. So this continues to be something we really want to focus on in our system, or that continues to really be an issue in our system. Our youth numbers also climbed last quarter. And we have a slight climb in veterans and a sharper climb in our chronically homeless population as well. If you look at, sort of the trend lines previously, you can see that these spikes normally don't happen at this point of year. We expect numbers to climb a little bit more in the summer months when more things like heat relief are available and tracking more people. So definitely interesting and concerning to see these numbers climbing in the first quarter. And then we have this lovely new addition to the homelessness trends report. So before we had all of those boxes that were kind of confusing and had green and red arrows, and it was like terrible to try to explain and talk about instead of just having people look at it. So we have a better thing for people to look at now. This has been a really big goal for the team, and I would say a really big win to have this. We now have a system performance measure dashboard on our website that the team has worked very hard to get. And you will be able to look at various system performance measures on our website and track them over time. So it's not just a single snapshot of what happened in the quarter. So really encouraging everyone to go to our website on the homelessness page. If you go to data, you will be able to see this new visual and look at it through time. And I think it's a way more effective way to communicate where our system performance measures are. And at the bottom, we continue to have this snapshot of clients who are served. So you can check out where we are at this quarter, where we were last quarter, and where we were this quarter last year. And also to note that as of quarter 4 of 2022, so last quarter, we are pulling in some non-HMIS data here. We're available for things like emergency shelters and safe havens to try to give a little fuller picture of where those programs are. And we added 6 new projects from January through March, so definitely a big win for the community there. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Nicole from UMOM. Do we track, now that we have several like hotel projects, Are we tracking those or do they fall into the emergency shelter category or?
I would say they fall into the emergency shelter category that's getting tracked in that non-HMIS data.
Okay.
If they're not in HMIS data.
Everything is in HMIS. So all of those hotels that are getting paid for by jurisdictions or kind of that have been set up throughout COVID are in that emergency shelter.
Okay.
Part of that increased 34% since March of last year
That's what I was
is a
wondering,
lot of
yeah.
those hotels. And the hotels, what initially started as COVID response hotels, where we were putting folks who had COVID, have now shifted over to just being emergency shelter. And a lot of those all of those bridge are in that shelter bucket.
Hey, just to clarify on that, so like my outreach team gets their outreach team, so they go into HMIS. Oh no, yeah, when we place them, we discharge them to shelter, and that's where you pick it up. Because they're and they then show up in the shelter number that way, because they're coming from outreach, placed in shelter, they show up there.
Correct. So this is just a point in time of March 1, 2023. So this is not every person you've ever placed, but just folks that were there that night. But it is anybody who is staying in an emergency shelter project in Maricopa County who is in HMIS is going to be included there. And also Nate's Phoenix Rescue Mission projects are included there.
Cleo, one small question and a comment. Are the projects all in Phoenix? Or are they spread out throughout the county? Would that be useful information to show dispersion?
Yeah, so the new projects specifically?
Yes.
So I can tell you what they are specifically. We have Mercy House, that MH is Mercy House, correct? Yes. So they're a family emergency motel assistance program. We have a YMCA Phoenix. We have HYC's project, transitional housing project. We have US Vets Ashley's Place. We have a Pass Mesa rapid rehousing project and a CPLC rapid rehousing DV project. So some of these are site-based, some of them are county, like scattered site-based. Yeah, I hope that gives a little indication.
Thank you. More general comment. I want to say shout out to everyone who puts together this information because I see it in other places. For example, there's a professor at the University of Arizona, Keith Bentley, who pulls together this report that's very detailed and it brings in not only homelessness, but eviction prevention issues, rent information, and affordable housing. And this is a major piece of his document. And if you haven't seen it, you should, and I can get you a copy. And but it's very helpful. And this information is a key piece of it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts around the data?
Vanessa, ABC, is adding 3 transitional housing projects, is that something, where is the funding coming from? Just curious, and how is that meeting? Are we seeing did we see a gap in need for transitional housing? Or was that kind of like a strategic move system-wide, or is it just providers seeking out their own funding to build those programs?
I'm going to pass that one to Katie. I'm not familiar with the
Youth. So one is privately funded, one actually both have some funding from Department of Housing and Department of Economic Security, but the majority of them are privately funded. Youth, how shelter for youth was a huge gap in our community and still is a huge gap. And Cleo, remind me who the third one. Oh, Ashley's Place is specifically targeted to veterans who are, I'm going to totally butcher this, but trauma, specifically sexual trauma while in the military. So very also targeted, and that is privately funded right now.
That's wonderful. That's really great to hear. And I just want to say, I'm sure one of the youth committees, I know there's 2 of them, are concerned with this, but I just wonder, what's our pipeline for those youth when they come up on those 2 years? I assume that most of those transitional housing programs are 2 years. Are we being purposeful about making sure that they have like a rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing project to go into?
I think the short answer is most of them are actually less than 2 years and really working from day one as to what that transition looks like out. They are doing a lot in the shared housing space specifically to figure out maybe they don't necessarily need a rapid rehousing project, but connection to employment, connection to a roommate, and can move in on their own with some of those wraparound services staying with them. And that's what both programs have really identified. I think in addition, they are looking at what additional housing programs can be dedicated to youth. And part of that is our application to the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. Not to put Haley on the spot, but if you want to touch quickly on that.
Yes. Wow. I just feel like you guys set me up for this one. Yeah. So we are submitting an application this month for the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, and that will be designated funding specifically for folks who are 24 and younger. For the purposes of our application, we're sort of thinking more about focusing on the 18 to 24 because we're noticing there's a big gap in services for that age group. But ultimately, the way that that grant is set up, our Youth Action Committee will be driving the work. So ultimately, they'll choose the projects that will get funded, similar to our rank and review process, but it'll be run by our Youth Action Committee. So keep your fingers crossed for us. We'll find out in the fall if we were awarded.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so moving on then.
I have Richard.
Oh, there we go. I see.
Hi. Hi, everybody. It's Dawn Bogart with Homeless Youth Connection. Just want to point out the funding for our Hatcher Phoenix Maricopa County project is all privately funded. The ADOH funding went to Flagstaff, and Eli really wants to support that. But I also want to say that the Hatcher property is fairly new. It's going to have 20 different beds and it will be 18 to 24. You mentioned the pipeline. The pipeline, as far as the youth coming into the program, they're referrals from our 130 high school partners. So all of the youth that are participating in HYC's program are enrolled either in high school or first year college. And as Katie mentioned, I really did a great job in summarizing the program. We are working with Home Inc. on their partnership program for apartments and things like that. So just some clarification.
Thank you, Dawn. Any other comments? Hearing none. We'll move to the system performance measures. On a quarterly basis, the committee will review the system performance measures report for the continuum of care. Dylan Belmont, with the Human Services Planner with MAG, will provide an overview of the system performance measures that were selected as part of the quarterly synthesis. Go ahead, Dylan.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Cruz. Yeah, so this is just going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into building off of Cleo's presentation on the homelessness trends report, pulling out the system performance measures so we can really look at just how effectively our system is running. This is the new dashboard that she mentioned. So once you go onto the MAG homelessness page, you can access this dashboard, going to this data drop down, clicking on system performance measures right here. Gives you a brief little overview of what the system performance measures are, why they're important. And there's also a cute little one pager right here that gives even more information as to, how exactly system performance measures are used, what we can do with them, and so on. So highly encourage you to check it out if you're interested. Essentially, these get submitted to HUD once a year. That's what these gray bars indicate, each of those annual submissions. However, we do provide quarterly updates as well to this committee. So just taking a look at this first one right here, this measures the length of time homeless, the average length of time. Ideally, we want our system to be at only an average of 97 days. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is a slight increase from the previous quarter from 117 days to 118. Moving to our next measure, we have returns to homelessness. Goal here is to reduce 5%. And you know what? Looking comparatively to the previous quarter, heading slightly in the right direction. Very, 1% decrease in returns, but overall still far off from the goal. So, this serves as a good reminder for our community as to why we're pursuing some of the work that we're doing. Obviously, the Connecting to Other Systems of Care work group is focusing on returns, as well as data analytics work group, to see what opportunities there are to specifically touch on this measure. Next one, job and income growth. The goal with this measure is to increase it over time, here from Q4 of last year to Q1 of this year is a small, pretty significant decrease in how job and income growth has taken shape. Moving to the next measure, we have those experiencing homelessness for the first time. This is also slightly trending in the wrong direction. Isn't as big of a leap, but from Q4 of last year, there has been a slight increase of about 400 or so. And then the last measure we have is successful exits, looking to increase those who are going from one intervention to another, ideally permanent housing. Here we do have something trending in the right direction, have an increase from 34% to 36%. And then specifically for those who are already in permanent housing, retaining that option or transferring to another permanent housing option. That has stayed pretty consistent overall, not just from quarter to quarter, but as you can see here, pretty solid trend line over the years. That is the main update for today, looking at Q1. Also just want to throw in another quick plug for our learning management system. If you haven't hopped on already, there is a course specifically to learn more about system performance measures, why they're important, what we use them for. And it's got a lot of great information. So highly recommend checking that out to increase our general knowledge about system performance measures so we can start attacking them and hopefully seeing those trend lines improve. Happy to take any questions.
Dylan,
Jim.
Chairman Cruz, Dylan. Being the layperson, who sets those performance goals?
That's a great question.
And are there national goals that we would be up or below that?
Yeah. So obviously all of these system performance measures are really closely tied to HUD's standards, right? So even though we provide submission and HUD uses that to evaluate the entire country's performance and each continuum individually. So because a lot of these measures, like the COC grant is distributed to each community, obviously that just makes it really sad. A lot of these goals do come from seeing where other communities are at and where we should be in comparison. Thank you.
I add to that, part of the reason we developed the performance standards that Dylan's been working on and are going to the board at the end of the month too, is some of these are a little less tangible than those performance standards. So those performance standards kind of fill straight into these system performance measures. And if we're hitting those performance standards, then these system performance measures will also kind of change in effect. But those are a little bit more tangible and things that folks can grab onto.
Other questions? Okay, we've got crickets in the meeting today. With no other questions, thank you, Dylan. We'll now move on to the next agenda item.
Hi, everybody. Nathan Smith here. So Phoenix Rescue Mission and From the Ground Up work together to conduct a gaps analysis on homelessness, addiction, and food insecurity. I'm actually going to provide an update on that analysis. I think the goal for this is to have, in addition to things that we see like quarterly trends reports, system performance measures, and data coming out of HMIS, there's a lot of great people who are doing a lot of other types of research to find to maybe dig into things that we're curious about. Phoenix Rescue Mission works in the areas of homelessness, addiction, and food insecurity. So for us, we felt like in order for us to do our strategic planning, we wanted to combine with the other data sets that were in existence out there, something that was more targeted to the work that we do. And so we commissioned a study, and I'll share my screen successfully, God willing. There you go, sir. So we commissioned this study. I'm going to give you just a quick overview of the study. From what we, it's hard to quantify, but from what we can tell, this is the first time that a study like this has been done. And what we mean by that is covering the particular areas that we covered, again, homelessness, food insecurity, and substance use disorder, and really prioritizing people who are experiencing these issues, as you'll see from the data set. So highlights are, we talked to a group of stakeholders. I'll list the stakeholders as we go across the 10 biggest cities in Maricopa County. We had regional partners, over 12 of them. We had faith partners, et cetera. But again, what I'm most proud of is just from people experiencing homelessness, we talked with 754 people. We gave them a $10 gift card so that they would be really willing to share information because we asked them quite a few questions. And so you can kind of see a better breakdown of our sample right there. Again, 754 people experiencing homelessness, 205 at food banks. We also interviewed people living on our own campuses because, again, we want to use this data not just to contribute to the information that is available here in our community, but we needed it to guide our own strategic planning internally. So we talked to staff and clients at the mission in the programs that we offer. And again, down toward the bottom, you can start to see, we're really middle bottom. 72 elected officials, city staff, and first responders. We talked to business owners and neighborhood leaders, voices who absolutely need to be included in homeless service delivery, because whether we like it or not, their voices are included in the homeless services system. So we said, let's intentionally go to business leaders and hear about homeless experience from their perspective, and so on. We wanted to make sure that we used other data sets that were already on offer. So we took a look at calls coming in to 211 for a variety of purposes in those 10 different cities. And basically the trend is more calls for almost everything, and sometimes substantially more. Some of that is certain because of capacity building at Solari, but others is, we very much presume, is because needs are going up in a bunch of different areas. One of the things that I also really want to point out is, we always go in on the point in time count. I've been, working in this for a long time. Everybody goes in on the point in time count and also acknowledges that it's the best we have, and it does mean something. One of the areas that I always gripe about is the underreporting of substance use disorder and serious and mental illness. And so when we said, if we have relationships with people because we're an outreach provider and we give them a $10 gift card, how different would our responses be on that? And so again, self-reporting, and our data set, 67.6% of people reported having a substance use disorder or addiction. And we kept our language very close to the PIT count language so that we can most compare apples to apples. And then same on serious mental illness. We went 31% in our data set. This actually needs to be updated a little bit for the more recent point in time. Oh no, it is 2023 PIT count. Yeah, you're right. So there you have it. Comparatively, all it really tells us is what we already know anecdotally, which is that we have a big problem in these areas.
Mr. Co-Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Or would you prefer questions at the end?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I like it now.
Okay. This is Kelly Williams with the MAG staff. One of the known pitfalls of PIT data is that we're doing it first thing in the morning. when people are often groggy and or just don't want to be bothered. It's cold, it's dark, et cetera. Not the whole morning, but there's a good chunk of our data collected then. Can you explain a little bit more about the environment in which this data was collected by
Yeah.
comparison?
Absolutely. So predominantly collected by outreach providers. There was times when we would go to shelters as well, but during regular hours when we would normally engage people. And so the environment is not someone that you don't know, that you've never met before, who may or may not work in homelessness and may be a police officer, and when it's freezing cold and it may have rained horribly the night before, and you are all kinds of things right now, including sleepy. So we ask people in regular times when we would typically engage with them, so basically business hours. And again, everyone who was doing the surveys is a homeless service provider. So the level of trust, the ability to navigate some of those sticky conversations, to open up doors, was different than you get with the hit or miss of the point in time count, folks.
Mr. Co-Chair, I would just say, I think the critical part of what you mentioned there is that there's already a relationship with the individual who's gathering the information. I think that's really an interesting twist to what you're presenting to us here today.
And if not, people who know how to build relationships across that line. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I would strongly agree with that. Moving forward, so we asked people, what is the primary reason you ended up not having a place to stay? So you'll see nuances at the very bottom just to situate your eyes. It says people experiencing homelessness. And you can't see it because of the text box on the right here, but with the sample size for this particular question was 599. So 599 people responded to this question. Unsurprisingly, most people said some kind of economic factor was the primary reason they ended up not having a place to stay. I think if you combine that with lack of affordable housing, your economic factors really start to increase. We just pulled that out because people cited housing specifically at the 10.9% rate. And even if you look down at some of the others, like eviction landlord issues down on the other top responses in order of frequency, you're seeing, again, more economic related issues. But I think it's important to look at things like health issue and familial issues. We often talk about the economic issues as systems people, those are well known to us. But when you look at the fact that these also correlate heavily with people basically entering homelessness because someone died. And when I started doing homeless outreach a whole bunch of years ago, and I started talking to people on the streets, I thought the main reason people became homeless is because someone died in their family. Like that seemed to be what I picked up on most. Obviously, the data would say that clearly there are differences, but it highlights how big that is as a cause of homelessness. And if you want to take a look, and I won't stay here for long because this presentation is short, but we wanted to make sure to use qualitative and quantitative data and pull out the voices of those who are experiencing these issues and make sure that our audience got a chance to see it.
Mr. Co-Chair, I will also just say, I think this is an area where we could do a much better job I think this is excellent, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's hard for folks who don't, your average community stakeholder who maybe just sees someone sleeping in their park. It's easy to build their own story on what led that person to the park versus this is there by the grace of God. These are things that could happen to us tomorrow.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes have happened to us already. We can connect to these things. We're used to things like this happening to us who work in the system, let alone who have tried to navigate it for ourselves. Again, just highlighting the people who've been around for a while often know about this old Morrison Institute study on homelessness that was popular for us for a long time. What this says is if you look at our study and you look at their study, the top 3 issues remain. Health and substance use used to be separated back in the day, and now they're combined. So basically, we're exactly the same. Why aren't people going into shelter? Honestly, this was my favorite finding, probably my single favorite finding. And I love that our community is doing things about it. So we have 49.9% of people are not entering shelter, they report, because of safety issue, just negative experiences that they've already had. Look at toward the bottom, other top responses, people have negative perceptions of shelter. So whether they have a negative experience of their own or someone told them that shelter is no good and stay away from there, negative perception from other people's experiences that there is this negative perception about shelters seems to be very much the dominant reason why people don't go in. And then the inaccessibility issue. So what it says is, for what's on offer currently, people seem to think that there is both an inadequacy and inaccessibility issue, that the shelter that we have currently needs to be safer, less crowded and cleaner, and that the shelters that also we have, that we either need to have more or we need to have better information or transportation to get people to it. And again, this will be in the packet, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you one more of these slides.
Nathan, I just have one question on the previous slide. It mentioned substance abuse as being, it looks like number 6, maybe. Is that because it was a shelter that they had to be clean for, or what does substance abuse mean? Like their substance abuse inhibited them from accessing shelter, or they had to be sober to be in shelter?
So that would have been coded. So the latter had to be sober to be in shelter would have been coded under curfew and rules.
Okay.
This is people who were like, I'm just using it in my addiction. I'm not going to a shelter.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That's more of it. Yeah. Again, talks to elected officials, city staff, and first responders, ask them what's working and what's not. They seem to think that the things that are working are the partnerships, basically the partnerships that they fund that are doing good things in their city. And the things that are not working are things that we talk about a lot. I'll say number 2 on what's not working, lack of publication, education, and awareness came up repeatedly, and everyone we talked to, that one came up in some way or another. Designated homelessness response teams and electronic triage ticket systems. So again, we're talking to mission partners. In some ways, we're talking about we love Phoenix Rescue Mission. Shamelessly, I will say thank you guys. But the electronic triage ticket system, that's a cool thing because it says we keep ourselves accessible to them. So if you are a partner with ours, we give you the opportunity to just enter information into a ticket system, and then it dings the whole outreach team, and the outreach team can respond. And some of our partners really love that. So I wanted to highlight that as a way for not just the mission, but outreach in general to think about being more accessible. And then business leaders, neighborhood leaders also agreed that, and case managers, direct service providers agreed that partnerships are working, and public education is among the things that are not. And in summary, partnerships are big time. Let's continue to, like we have been doing, to focus on those. Homelessness correlates with a whole bunch of things. Inaccessible and ineffective shelters. Like 69% of the samples said there was something wrong there. Lack of housing, as we know, the economic factors, as we're aware of, but I think the inefficient and under-resourced healthcare systems is something that we need to talk more about, as well as the lack of familial support. So leaning on natural supports, as well as these other systems of care that touch our people that may have gaps in them. So thank you for your time. That's all. Any questions? Does anyone have any further questions or comments? And there's a whole lot more to it. So I can give anyone you want the big version, but that's the highlights.
Co-Chair Smith, great job. Is this public information? Is this released?
So 2 ways of thinking public information. Have I made this public on some public website? No. Will I share it with everyone and everyone can share it to everyone else? Yes.
Thank you. That's good. Because when you said in the very first slide, it's the first in the nation, I'm going, wearing my PR hat, well, we need to communicate that. Not only the information, which is wonderful, informative, but the fact that, Phoenix, Metro Phoenix, we're out there. Number 2, and I guess I direct this to Katie, is we have a communications work group. And the mention of lack of public awareness, education, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we need to take this to that group and figure out what we can talk about, come up with solutions.
Yeah, so Ash is part of that work group and helped do this gaps analysis. So we're talking about how do we better link that once it is publicized on a public website. It'll get linked on the MAG website as well. And then the COC is required to do a gaps analysis each year. We did a series of focus groups, stakeholder meetings that some of you all attended in the last month. We've incorporated feedback from that gaps analysis in that gaps analysis. And so that gaps analysis, both gaps analysis have identified education to the public being a really high priority. And so that is something that is on our agenda to come in both June and July. If anybody would like to attend the communications work group, third Tuesday of the month at 12 p.m.
As a follow-up, communications is not just pushing stuff out, and this is for other organizations I'm affiliated with, pushing stuff out on a website or having it in the newspaper. I think everyone, we need to have a more assertive communications plan for outreach, organizations, chamber of commerce, business, whatever, city councils, and just go to hit these folks, to let them know of information like this and information that this whole group is doing and that it provides. So something for, I'll bring that up in the communications desk. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Vanessa Carthel, ABC. Just wondering for the outreach interviews with persons experiencing homelessness, geographically, what were the people that were touched?
You mean geographic, like where were they?
Yes.
Yeah, across the 10 biggest populated cities in Maricopa County.
Okay.
So we, Glendale, Phoenix, Mesa, Tempe, we went and so predominantly urban areas, everywhere that you would think of that people experiencing homelessness, so bus stops, places where people frequent, like, do you go to meals here? Again, we went to shelters. We interviewed people at the 28th Street and Washington shelter. But yeah, combination of West and East Valley, and again, bigger cities. So what you could say, and this was come up in one of our presentations, absolutely limitation, did not touch rural, didn't attempt to touch rural because we don't work in that. Would strongly encourage taking a methodology like this to rural areas, but that's what we did.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on to the next agenda item?
Richard Cruz, Human Services Campus. I think one of the things that really stands out to me in terms of the mirror moment that is this information is that over 60%, when you're looking at it, when it comes to why people aren't in shelter, have to do with us, not with them, with us. And only 7.4% were like, I just don't really want to go to shelter, right? But like, that's something that can't be lost when we're having the conversation, because in these conversations, especially like media is really big on, they want to have these elongated conversations right now. And in all those conversations, what comes up is, well, why aren't people accessing shelter? It's like, because like they've had adverse experiences with shelter, or because, like when cleanliness, safety, all of these things that are on us. It's not just about personal preference, right? And so I just think that has to we have to make sure that's not lost in the conversation.
Thanks for saying that, Co-Chair Cruz. I think if there's, I'm going to double down on that. If there's any one thing, I have a couple minutes, so say as a parting note before moving to the next agenda item, it is really exactly that. Why I think that slide around shelter and some of this other data is important is because it gives color to what it means for people to be service resistant from their perspective. So oftentimes, unfortunately, we use service resistant as an excuse to move on to the next person or to stop re-engaging and constantly engaging. They don't have ROI. So to go to a service resistant individual and try to work with them 20 times to get absolutely nowhere does not have ROI, but we're not necessarily in this game for ROI. So what we need to be doing is thinking about how do we restructure our systems such that it automatically addresses the needs that people are bringing up. So now we have a data set that says, here's the things that people are bringing up. It says, okay, let's look at not just shelter, right? Because this isn't coming for any particular provider. This is just saying, hey, this is what people are saying. But also around outreach, I think, like what Kelly mentioned, is creating relationships with people is a very valuable thing in outreach. Let's make sure to emphasize that everywhere. But turn service resistant into, this is what people say about shelter. This is what people say about the services that they're receiving. This is what people are saying about their experiences in healthcare. And then if we addressed all those things, how many fewer people would be service resistant? Well, I can't quantify that, but I think systematically that's the approach that we need to take. So yeah, I appreciate that. That's one of my favorite things about this, I would say. I said that 5 times already. All right, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is community adopted best practices. Jim, I think you actually said something. One of the things I think we should talk about as we look at the community adopted best practices is the communications plan for it. Annually, the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee reviews and updates the community adopted best practices. MAG hosted 2 sessions to get community feedback on the document. Haley Owens, Human Services Planner with MAG, will present on the changes made.
Thank you, co-chairs. I will go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at our updated adopted best practices. I did track all the changes in there. I have way too many things open at the same time. Okay. So instead of going through like line by line and like showing you guys what was changed, I will say a lot of it was just updating language to be more consistent throughout the document. There were a couple things that were brought up from community members that I did not personally feel like MAG had the expertise to weigh in on. Specifically, that was case management ratios. That is what we have. We took that information based on what we have seen other communities do. So we didn't change those just because I didn't feel comfortable doing that without more information from direct service providers. But I just want to open the floor if anybody has any feedback, if they got a chance to read it, if we want to jump to a certain section. While you're thinking of all your great questions, I also want to share with you that we have, as a team, and then through our listening sessions, have sort of been kicking around a few ideas about how to make this document more accessible. It is quite hefty, and sometimes I feel like by the time you get to the bottom of it, it's like, I don't even know what I'm reading about anymore. So we have talked about maybe breaking it up into different sections, just so it's like, oh, if I'm only looking for best practices surrounding transitional housing, I can just jump right to that section. So definitely I'm interested in your feedback on that, if that would make it a little bit easier to digest. But yeah, I just want to open the floor to all of you. Oh, Jen.
Yeah, this is Jennifer from Mercy Care. I didn't have a question, but I did go through the document and I had like 3 pieces of feedback. So would it be appropriate for me to run through those now?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So under the length of stay section, I think it might just be a typo, but it was referred to as clientized, and
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to be efficient, and it turns out that was not the way to go. So yes, make that correction. Thank you.
Okay, sure. And then my other feedback was under the supportive services section. Oh, yeah, I think you just passed it. I think it's up a little bit more. So my first piece of feedback was the last bullet. I didn't know if we wanted to add a little bit more content to that. You know, kind of the other bullets, we kind of explain it. And this one, we just say furniture, welcome kits, cleaning supplies. So do we want to say, you know, assistance with connection to these resources, or that they're provided, or just thought maybe we would want to add a few more words there.
Great, thank you. Yes.
And then my last piece of feedback was also under supportive services, and I wasn't sure, you know, if we wanted to add anything in here to kind of expect that coordination between behavioral health services or, you know, health plans when that's an option. Because when I think of supportive services, I think of Medicaid covered services. And I know that that's not always what we're referring to, but I think it's important that when Medicaid services are available, that there's kind of that coordination that's happening. And so I wasn't sure if this would be the best place maybe to add some language around that coordination of care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Jen, are you talking about Nathan Smith here? Are you talking about like, are you basically saying that we should include language that says if the person is with, has access to essentially connect with their health plan to see what kind of supportive services are there and make sure that they're taking advantage of them? Is that behind what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, whether it's a housing provider that doesn't, you know, have the ability to provide services, making sure that they're, you know, engaging the healthcare system. But also, like you were saying, kind of, you know, when they're available, making sure that coordination is happening and that we're utilizing those Medicaid covered services, so that we're freeing up the services for other people or the funding for other people, that we're really maximizing Medicaid services.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Haley, when this report is finalized, where will it go?
So right now, the version from last year lives on our website. It is under our training and resources.
Policies and manuals
Thank
page.
you. We just have so much stuff on our website. It's so great to look at. So it will be, yeah, it'll be housed there. So I definitely want to like keep the floor open for feedback, but I know that the co-chairs and I have discussed, and this came up in our feedback sessions for these best practices, is like, okay, this is great. We pull it out every year and we dust it off and we add some stuff to it, and then what? And so I think we wanted to have a little bit of a broader conversation around what is the best way to get this out to everybody. How can we disseminate that information? And we would love your feedback on that as well.
One that's kind of crossover between both I think it's a professional development section. One of the things that I think can help get the word out is piggybacking it with the Learning Gateway, the LMS. So there should be a reference, I think, in the professional development section to leveraging the LMS as a way of tracking it, as a way of assigning, you know, things that we as a community want to make sure that people are engaging with. And so I think as that goes out, you know, this can also go out with it and that should spread. But yeah, there definitely got to be other ways. So Jem, I wanted to kind of piggyback on that communications group. I mean, I don't know what y'all are doing. And I know I sit here in COC committee and I say every other group should do a bunch of stuff. However, if I don't know what all is trying to be communicated, but among the things I think would probably rise to the top would be community adopted best practices that everybody should have access to and understanding of best practices. I guarantee you there's a bunch of homeless service providers who have not gone to whose case managers don't know the information in the rapid rehousing section of rapid rehousing providers. And so how can the communications group, if we already have that, potentially be leveraged to help get out what is probably one of the more important pieces of communication that we have right now?
Vanessa Carthel, ABC. Earlier, Haley, you were mentioning breaking it up into kind of maybe by intervention. And I love that idea of getting it into the Learning Gateway because it is a great portal for that communication to get the education out. But maybe that in the Learning Gateway, it's rapid rehousing, best practices, outreach best practices, PSH, but for all best practices in working with persons who are experiencing homelessness. And then it kind of maybe then goes off into the different details for each intervention. But I think that would be wonderful. And I did have some feedback. Do we mention anywhere that home visits are very important to see the home, what the home, the condition of the home and addressing that?
I do not think it is in this iteration, but we can certainly add that.
Okay. I figured it. Probably somewhere.
The intensity of services based on the needs of the client and contact initiated by the program at least 1 month.
So would you want us to add just more information around that or?
Yeah, I think the importance, why is a home visit important is maybe we just add a little explanation around that, yeah, I think with COVID, we got away with a lot of away from it a little bit, which makes sense. Everyone needs to be safe. But just talking about the importance of it and really the purpose of seeing firsthand what are the needs that maybe the participant can't communicate to the case manager.
Great, thank you.
What, if you'd like to describe what happens in a home visit from your perspective on a permanent housing program, like, yeah, what would be some things that you would say would go like that?
Well, I just in general, a case manager observes, right? So I'll say from experience of being a rapid rehousing case manager, I went in and one time saw, a bunch of big empty alcohol bottles, and it's not about judgment, right? It's just saying, oh, like I noticed that that's there. Tell me about that. And she's like, you're not supposed to see that. Well, I'm here and I see it, and let's just talk about it. If it's just you had a party last night, cool. How was it? Did you have fun? But is it impacting your ability to look for employment, and do we need to address that? So it's just a matter of, to me, the observation piece of it, the rapport building part of that. But you put me on the spot, so I can think about it and send you some feedback. Yeah.
I think that the only reason I'm leaning in on it is because I think we had the group that the lived experience couple. Something else.
That was the best practice.
That was the best practice one. Okay. So in that one, people came in and essentially talked about how important it was for them to look like. So like, from my experience as a housing-based case manager, I found out one of my clients was a hoarder. I never knew that. That is the difference between this individual staying in housing or not. Sure, like the voucher's still there, and that sort of thing. That voucher means nothing with the amount of stuff this individual has. Some people, you find out they're living messily, they're having a bunch of friends come over. The home visits is one of the most important pieces of like that section in permanent housing, because that is the thing that's going to help keep people in housing, aside from all, again, the subsidies that we're providing. So yeah, just leaning in on like really emphasizing that home visit bullet point would be really good.
This is Nicole. I just want to add like the safety component, especially working with families. When you have minor children in the home, you might have parents experiencing significant mental illness or substance abuse. And so putting eyes on those children and making sure basic needs are being met, like making sure that it's relatively clean and safe for them, but also the food aspect. And I've come the last 3 times during school time and they're not in school, like those kind of concerns. And then the final one, just, I have to for Home Inc. is the engagement with landlords, checking in and making sure things are going well. And if you're not checking in with the landlords, a lot of times you don't know necessarily what's going on. And I think that is all a part of those home visits, even though it's not necessarily specifically with the client. It's an opportunity just to make sure that, everything is going as is reported. So.
I think that's such a great point, and a reason why we want to revisit these best practices every year, because it's like maybe a few years ago, landlord engagement was not something that was at the top of mind, but that is something that we know is vital for people to stay in housing now. So I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Marcy from Home Inc. And, I just want to piggyback off of that, because there's so often that we're addressing the issue after it's a real problem, and that members' housing is already in jeopardy, and talked about the high traffic or unauthorized occupants. If they're getting regular visits from their case management or supportive services, they're going to know that somebody is in the house who doesn't belong, in the house based on their subsidy. To Home Inc. and the housing providers is also vital. So if you see something, say something, because often, we're notified when the eviction notice comes, or the immediate termination, or the 5-day or the 10-day, or the health and safety notice after it's already, like I said, it's an issue. Now they're losing their housing, and we have to have that staffing as to whether or not we're going to rehouse them, as opposed to saving their housing from the forefront. So I appreciate that focus on that. So thank you.
So this is in Word, correct? I could see this as a self-assessment checklist where the executive director of an organization or the management team of an organization could sit down and go through this line by line and go, do we have easy access to a comprehensive array? Yes, no, not, don't know. And then just go through it. And it's a discussion for the director or the leadership team to go, how well are we doing? And then just score it and then figure out, oh, here are the places where we can improve. Here's the places where we're doing well, but maybe in some sort of more usable format. Not that this is not usable, but
Right,
that
right.
this, maybe there's a second section that's just a check sheet.
Yeah,
Yes, no.
and we actually got that feedback too, which we loved that idea. We think it's great, and I think that will benefit from like breaking it out into more digestible pieces. It's like, okay, we don't need to like look at this from we don't offer all of these services, so how can we make this checklist? I think the only thing, which is I feel like I saw Cleo moving a little bit, is like that would be like definitely a self-monitoring thing, and I don't know that it would be something that would be wrapped up into like Mag's monitoring situation.
No,
but yeah, so we would just have to be like, again, with the communication and marketing around that, like, hey, this is just for you all to check in on your own program and like see like, oh, what can we be doing differently or whatever, but not something that would be like punitive, and Mag would not be overseeing that.
Totally.
This is Richard. It's like, how do you get organizations to have conversations about this transparently and then maybe report it anonymously, so this way we can actually know what's happening around these community adopted best practices, and having a conversation around that, and then maybe doing something around that builds, like, bridges us back out, similar to how you just presented the information you did around the study. Like how do we actually know in a non-punitive environment, to your point, that this is happening, or how can we then identify where organizations or where the system needs capacity building to make those things reality?
So I'm a board president of another organization that oversees infant immunization, teen immunization. And we started an awards program where if you meet 90% of goals to reach, the children that you're after, you'll get an award. So maybe if there's like some key indicators that are most important that we promote, who's doing what's happening out there in the community, who's doing the best, and make it a kind of a positive, and highlight those organizations that are reaching those goals. Just an idea.
I see that in a both and type of space, right? Like, I think that's a whole other thing that could be done around, like, what is the gold standard? And then around that, then who is tracking that? Like, what does that look like? But like, there's this other piece around, like, holding the mirror in a live environment that, essentially folks did their homework, and their homework was to have these conversations amongst their organizations and bring it, and then like really see whether, like, if they did it, reported it, and then like we're all in some environment where everybody's present, and then we're showing like, oh, we saw that 65% of organizations are hitting this particular point, right? And then so that says to the room, like, okay, we obviously have a gap right now. What do we want to do about the gap, right? Like, because otherwise we get data, we look at data, we swim in the data, we never get out the pool. Actually, we're not even swimming in the data, we're just kind of like in the jacuzzi of it, right? And sitting in it. And so it's like, how do we actually make it actionable so that across the sector people are moving? Because if we go back again to the data that you presented, right, 60% of like what was there is the onus is on us. It's not about like at some point we have to acknowledge, okay, so we've got these best practices. Now who's practicing it? Right. And if we're not, why aren't we? And what do we need to do as a sector to get there? Right. Yes, we've got the learning management system, and that's great. But again, who's using it? Right. And like, or is it just going to be there? right? Like those are the pieces that we have to think about, because I go back to, right? So my dad is he builds and fixes planes for a living, right? So he's got some amazing tools in the garage. I don't know how to use any of those tools, right? The tools are there, right? But if Richard, we'll work on that Boeing A23, I'm gonna be like, oh, some people gonna die today because I don't know what the hell to do with that. But thanks for the tools, right? Like we've got to actually like figure out how do we get to the point of execution and implementation. We're building a great inventory of a variety of things, but how do we actually go to the next level as a community to say like, okay, now what are we doing, and what help do people actually need doing it?
Vanessa Carthel, ABC. I think that definitely points to if we send out a self-monitoring sheet and the executive goes through it and talks to their supervisors about it. If they identify a gap, I think we need to be prepared to identify technical assistance for that program. And then also, I think, like you said, not being punitive, but just being a very supportive partner, especially like maybe in new projects with the NOFO coming up. Maybe there's a narrative on the next go round that says, how do you plan in projects that are really going to strive for that? But yeah, I think we need to be very intentional about it.
Sorry, one more question. So what would be the universe of organizations that would look at this or this would apply to?
So for us, we feel like it would be all of the organizations that are in Maricopa County. So that are like sort of touch mag in any way. That is what we want. Unfortunately, just to be like very honest, we only fund a handful of organizations. So we don't have like a lot of like carrot stick situation here. But we obviously like, that's why it's so important to us to bring everybody can come to the table, because we want them to feel like they're being heard and listened to. And so there is more buy-in that way. So I feel like that's mostly why we bring this to everybody, because we want them to.
I think I'll just add to that. I think like this checklist is great. Cleo oversees monitoring for our team. That's only housing programs. And a lot of this has to do with shelters and transitional housing in the same way that performance standards apply to kind of that big continuum of care, but not necessarily COC funded grants. And so that really is where that community buy-in and really kind of some rising tides lift all boats. We need to kind of, as a community, continue to lift up and not trying to offer some of those trainings through the learning management system and things like that. But we have nothing to hold you accountable if you choose not to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a different kind of conversation, and where it's not about the monitoring. It's not about those formal processes. It's the convening power of MAG or somebody else, but the convening power to say, we acknowledge when it comes to what are we going to do about it, and like, let's bring people together to make it happen. Like, it can't be, this is another process, because if that's the case, one, people polish for the process, right? People polish for the monitoring. They do that. Like, they're like, well, let me make sure that I'm giving you my best answer, not the real answer, my best answer, right? And this has to be like, no, like, we're acknowledging the moment that we're in, and then what do we want to do about the moment that we're in, right? That's where I think like it has to come from, because the people around the table can't and it shouldn't be a table, it should be a big room, because you can't just have the table. But the people around the table can't just be those that are funded by MAG, because it's really just whoever convenes it is like, here's the North Star, right? And everybody's following to go to the North Star, right? That's what has to happen. And so, and it's also a recruiting tool, when it comes to other organizations that need to be around our various tables that aren't around the tables because they don't really understand how to have access to the tables. And so this way it's like, okay, no, we're also like, we're inviting everybody who's doing the work, right? And in doing the work, because if we're doing community adopted best practices, that's not MAGA community adopted best practices, it's the community adopted best practices. So it's got to go beyond that in terms of like, what's the clarion call? And like figuring that out. And like I said, like whether that's MAG and it's this room or somebody else or a collaboration of other organizations that have enough gravitas to say, if you build it, folks will come. Like we've got to figure that out. But otherwise we look at the same information every month, right? The data's not new, right? But what we do can be new. Right. And we've got to be able to do other things with it. So that this way we're getting the information here to go out and go do something else with it. Yeah. I was thinking in my head, I was thinking 11:30 and that was a mistake. That's why we need to. Yeah, that's why I said, Katie, keep us on track. Katie, for the record, keeps me on track with Katie keeps me on track with the emergency shelter spreadsheet, but she's not good at keeping me on track with timing. So my apologies. We're going to move on to the next thing. We're doing all right. It's not that bad, man. Not being able to help myself though. We have an outreach collaborative at MAG. We don't have like a emergency shelter collaborative or do we have these, right?
You were just talking about the emergency shelter.
Oh yeah, there's the work group. Yeah, but I won't attend. So no, the point being though is we have do we have, let me say it like this, it's really a question. Do we have a rapid rehousing work group? Do we have a permanent supportive housing work group?
We do not currently have a rapid rehousing or a permanent supportive housing work group. We have in the past, but it has not been resurrected. There are some work happening in those spaces, like the Move On work group, specifically targeting certain pieces of those, but we don't currently have kind of a operations of those two different types of programs. If folks are interested, we're definitely happy to kind of revisit that conversation.
All right, well, there's two places where those folks are already convened. So community adopted best practices could potentially go to those groups. Moving on to connecting our systems of care update, decreasing returns to homelessness was identified as part of the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care System Performance Measures. In order to accomplish this goal, I will discuss the current work being done in this particular work group and how to better focus efforts to increasing connections to other systems of care. So we have, the COC committee has a connecting our systems of care work group, as we just mentioned. That work group has, just a quick history looked at, are we going to be trying to assess internal homeless systems gaps or gaps between the homeless system and other non-traditionally homeless systems? We decided to go focus on gaps within the homeless system. The data analytics work group came to the COC committee meeting or two ago, did presentation. The work group came back. We decided that of all the things, given the membership of the work group, the membership of the committee, plus that combined with the opportunities presented in the data analytics work group presentation, rapid rehousing gaps. So gaps related to rapid rehousing would be our area of focus. That was a decision, concrete decision that we made in our last meeting. And so then we talked about a few things like learning more from the ESG committee, something that's been bandied around. That's something we'll put some energy into between now and the next meeting. Just how are they messaging best practices to providers? Do providers feel pressured to cut subsidies at the 9-month mark for rapid rehousing and things like that? So we really want to talk to the ESG committee and gather information from where this stuff already exists. We want to talk to gather more information about gaps, talk to members, participants in rapid rehousing programs, talk to providers about what their move on strategies look like. And ultimately, I think for its concrete deliverables, we really said, hey, it would be cool, but I want to hear what everyone else has to say. So if we created 2 interview questionnaires, that's sort of like where we're at right now. The interview questionnaires, one devoted to participants and one devoted to providers, and then spend some time sourcing the best questions to ask in the interview questionnaire, whether, quantitative and a Likert scale, open-ended and qualitative. So really build out a tool similar to, I guess, I guess I was presenting earlier with the resource gap analysis, but this time more targeted specifically at finding gaps that can be plugged related to rapid rehousing and in a way that brings our returns to homelessness down. So I only say all that because all that really governs the direction that we go. So we want to bring our returns to homelessness down. Rapid rehousing can contribute to that. We need to go talk to the people who work in and are who are participating in rapid programs. So when we get together, we hope to have sourced some information when the work group reconvenes, to have sourced some information that can help us to start putting together some questionnaires. And then that's one of the things that will come out either of our next meeting or some time after our next meeting, is hopefully we'll have questionnaires or a different direction that we're going in if something else makes better sense. Like, that's always still on the table. And I also just took a note to just see how the permanent housing section, how the housing sections of the community adopted best practices could inform building out a questionnaire like that too. I think that should be reflected there. So if anyone else from the group wants to give an update, Marcy, I know you're a really active participant. Please feel free to add on, or anyone else. Jennifer, if you would like to. If anyone has questions or comments, we're free to take them.
No questions, but we did call out that we would be reaching out. So Nicole, you'll be hearing from some of us soon, as well some of our other rapid rehousing providers. Home Inc. Operates a lot of those programs and administers them. So we have kind of a foot in the door and a perspective that's a little bit different. So we will be reaching out just to kind of see, where, or why the returns to homelessness from that particular intervention are affecting our community the way they are. So thank you, Nathan. And I'll be talking to some people soon.
No, it's fine. That's why I said just anything else before I move. Okay. Okay. So now the request for future agenda items. Do committee members have any action or discussion items for future meetings? Go ahead, Jim.
I don't know if it's a future agenda item, but with the legislature kind of coming to somewhat of a close yesterday from the standpoint of housing, affordable housing bills, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that because it imploded. And some people may think that's a good idea and some people think it's a bad idea. And then the chairperson of the effort resigns that night. Just not that I want to talk politics, but just the outcome. Because now we have another year to talk about, or lead up to possible legislation that will help in certain areas of homelessness and affordable housing and other things.
Hey, Jim, what exactly are you talking about?
Well, there was 3 bills. Oh gosh, the numbers. Dylan, No, it's 2 Senate bills and 1 House bill that had pieces. And some people will say that it was directly related to affordable housing. Some people say it was more towards government, improving government by taking some of the restrictions off of zoning. Very contentious on both sides, and yet nothing came about. There's attempts at compromise, but that fell. And so do we benefit as a community from that or not? I'm just curious. And maybe this is not the forum to talk about it because MAG is impartial.
It's not party, it's people.
I know.
Yeah,
I would love
I'm saying
to
it's not party, it's people. So like,
I would love to talk about it.
I think like there are those conversations that need to happen. I think that also though, like we need to, as a group, have a conversation then about what didn't get done, and as well to what didn't get done, how do we spend the next 6 months when it comes to writing legislation, lobbying, not lobbying,
And not to say that nothing got
advocating,
right.
For like things so that this way, when the session opens back up, we're not left in where we were at the start of the session. We're like, oh, there's no bills, like there's nothing really coming, right? Like we should be able to inform that process. So I think that fits, and it fits in this space in terms of requesting a future agenda items. As far as this, I'm a weave it for you, Jim. For us to be able to have a conversation around like like a legislative review, a recap, right? And then there's another conversation in addition to that, that is, what do we want to see happen and who needs to be around the table, so that this way when we can give the housing coalition ammo around what they need to be doing for us, or then say that, well, if y'all don't want to do it, we do, right? And what does that look like?
Because not to say that there wasn't good news. Earlier on, the budget was passed and, millions for certain things. That's great. But then there was this other stuff that happened
Right.
later on.
So I think that's good.
Okay,
So I just have to put in the obligatory,
Go ahead.
bag comment is we don't do any sort of advocacy or anything like that. So we can do a legislative recap, but we cannot really have any discussions on like what legislation we would like to see in the future or any planning of that. I would definitely really encourage everybody to connect with the Housing Coalition, because they are the advocacy arm, and that's where we sort of push everybody. But as we sit in this quasi-governmental space, we just don't really have those conversations.
Could they be invited to present? Does that function of
Yep.
this group?
So they typically present to the board. That's really where policy discussions are happening, is at the board meeting. So if you all are interested, you can either join the board meeting conversations, or we can invite them to come here as well.
I think we should invite them because they've been going through some transitions. So a new director is on board, a new assistant, I'm guessing, and just meet and greet.
Yes.
And what are your priorities? What's going on?
All of the above. Okay.
So for the next agenda, for the next meeting,
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that.
Okay. Thank you,
Chairman.
Jim. I agree. Like I said, you know where I'm at. So
There you go.
And we are about done,
About-
but it would be
about damn
great to
time.
just find out how we react to whatever happened in the legislative as in response to that.
like I said, we still need a recap. And then whatever conversations happen outside of the COC that are not COC committee conversations, but are other conversations. Okay. Any other things? Okay, so no, if not, do we have any? Go ahead.
What-
I didn't look to my right. That was my problem.
To give the committee a update on the Move On Work Group. There's
Awesome.
been a lot of stuff going on, and I think y'all's feedback would be great.
Awesome. Okay, so duly noted. Any other?
One other announcement from staff, we have started a system flow dashboard office hours. So this is a time to come together to ask questions about the system flow dashboard, understand it. Really encourage folks to watch the video in the learning management system if you have not seen it prior to attending. That meeting will be the last Tuesday of the month at 10:30 in the morning. It will be 1 hour. Drop in as you see fit. If there is, say you have questions, or if you want to just come and listen to discussion about the system flow dashboard, that will be a standing meeting. Any committee is, or work group member, or anybody is welcome to attend. Registration is on the event calendar on the MAG website.
Awesome. Any other comments from the committee? 413 as of April 30th. That's how many people have passed away this year while experiencing homelessness. 413. The number's higher than that. I haven't gotten this month's numbers yet because it comes to Amy Schwab and Lender, and she is on the beach in Kona with Deepak Chopra, having a great time. She's had a yoga retreat, which that's my comment. Take care of yourselves and love on yourselves so that you can do the work. Because we need to recharge. We work ourselves to death, and then it's no good for you to be dead and add into the number. So I appreciate you all. Thank you for your time, and this meeting is adjourned.